Although it doesn't much look like it, this is one diner that's been saved. The guy who owns the Italian restaurant next door rescued it from Cambridge last summer and brought it here to Alston where he's renovating it. But most old diners aren't so lucky. And diners aren't the only uniquely American commercial structures from the first half of this century threatened with extinction. Motels, original gas stations, and fast food outlets, forms generated by the rise of the automobile, are struggling for survival as well. To help them out, 2 years ago, a group of professionals, historians, architects, geographers, and artists, formed the Society for Commercial Archaeology. Its purpose? To preserve the best of American popular architecture.
Just as people are interested in preserving a well-kept Victorian townscape, I think people should currently be interested in thinking about saving McDonald's.
Kathlyn Hatch, professor of architectural history and one of the founders of the Society for Commercial Archaeology.
Now, in saving buildings, the problem of time or elapsed time is an interesting one in people's perception. We are in the last decades of the 20th century, but most people think of 20th century as modern, and I think they tend to discard the past as being more recent than it really is.
And because the commercial environment renews itself so rapidly, companies may change their corporate design every 5 or 10 years, there is more past than ever to preserve. Our architectural history has become a growth industry. Of course, the Society recognizes that the preservation of all commercial buildings is neither possible nor even desirable. But on the basis of design, materials, community significance, and face it, sure nostalgia, the Society deems samples of our man-made past worthy of survival. One local artifact recently targeted by the group is the Coca-Cola sign on Starrow Drive, whose existence is now threatened by the pending sale of the Coke bottling plant to the Metropolitan District Commission. Local members of the Society did not take that threat lightly.
I must say, I awoke one morning hearing a radio report that the building had been sold, and I said, this cannot happen.
They can't have this one, was my exact personal reaction.
If they win this battle, and the MDC or other future owner of the structure agrees to the unusual situation of private advertising atop a public building, it will be but one victory in a theoretically endless war between historical aesthetics and business. The Society is also keeping its eye on two familiar landmarks in Kenmore Square.
The white fuel sign is apparently 1936, and it was updated in the 1940s. And the Citgo sign, which is a beautiful sign and a very good aesthetic experience, is from 1966. That's fairly recent. Kenmore Square is Boston's Times Square, and I think they're both very important signs, and they're again, another important part of the Boston experience.
And then there are the diners, those descendants of the lunch wagon which succeeded in combining romance and gastronomy at low cost. Artist John Bader, a member of the Society, is so anxious to protect these shards of pre-fast food America that he paints them. He rendered this Arlington, Massachusetts diner, the Pullman, in 1974. When he returned 2 years later to show to a friend, it was gone. But the old kitchenette lunch car will live to serve again at its new home in Alston, thanks to the efforts of Tony Bosco, owner of the House Restaurant.
Just read about it in the paper that it was going to be bulldozed under. I went and looked at it, and it was just such a beautiful piece, and decided it deserved something better than that. However, it took me 3 weeks to get it off the lot and onto the street and put one man in the hospital for 2 weeks. So it's becoming quite expensive. I wish I had a lot more land. I'd save a lot more of these things.
One member of the Society for Commercial Archaeology says it wants to raise the consciousness of corporations, but that perhaps is not the only consciousness that needs raising.
What do you say to people who tell you, hey, they're ugly? Why preserve them at all? These are truly ugly buildings.
Ugly is really a problem. I think going back to the 19th century, people had no appreciation of commercial architecture. It's sort of tainted with the quest for money and the god of mammon.
But one Society member did not think this Hood Dairy Bar, formerly in Taunton, was too ugly to buy and give to the Museum of Transportation, where it's now a frozen yogurt concession near the museum's new home. Nor was this former White Tower hamburger joint in Central Square, Cambridge, thought too ugly to convert into a macrobiotic cafe. And this Cambridge gas station from the 1920s was sitting empty last year when a dentist, a retired journalist, and a bookseller turned it into this alternative energy company. But a salvage diner here and a converted gas station there, doesn't spell victory yet for
However,
these
I would say that
preservationists.
we'll know that we've really arrived when Disney incorporates an early automobile commercial strip with diners, gas stations, etc. at Disney World.
And speaking of Disneyland, it too will eventually wear out.
What effort should be made by the government or by the Disney Corporation to preserve such a large landscape like Disneyland or Disney World will be a challenge of the highest order. I'm sure it will consume somebody's professional life, essentially.
Richard Rosen for the 10 o'clock news.